All right, let's dive in today and talk about something pretty wild. SpaceX's Starship program.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
Huge. I mean, this thing is supposed to completely change space travel, get us to Mars, the whole deal, but
You've been blowing up lately.
it keeps exploding. So that's what we're looking at. Is this progress? Is it reckless? Is Elon Musk a visionary? Or is he playing with fire? Literally playing with fire.
We've got reports, analyses, firsthand accounts, the whole thing.
It's pretty fascinating. You have this goal that's incredibly ambitious. You want to build a spacecraft that you can reuse over and over to make space travel cheaper and get us to Mars and colonize it.
Right.
And then you see these explosions, debris falling over the Caribbean, the FAA getting involved.
Yeah.
It just raises a lot of questions about how we balance innovation with being responsible when developing new technologies.
It's like, on the one hand, reusable rockets could make space travel like getting on a plane, flying across the Atlantic.
But on the other hand, I don't want to have to dodge rocket parts when I'm on vacation.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
So let's start with Starship's big goal.
Yeah, the big goal here is that Starship is supposed to completely change how we think about space travel. Imagine a spacecraft that can take like 100 people all the way to Mars, bring them back, and then be ready to fly again. That's what they want to do.
Wow.
And the key is reusability. Think about how expensive airplanes would be if we just threw them away after every single flight.
Yeah.
That's basically what we're doing with rockets right now.
So that makes the cost savings so clear. So it's about making space accessible, not just for billionaires and astronauts.
Yeah, exactly. And not just accessible, but routine.
Yeah.
They want to make it like, okay, going to Mars, yeah. Maybe not going to the grocery store, but,
Yeah.
much less crazy than it seems right now.
Right.
And that's where their whole philosophy of, testing things quickly and changing things based on the results comes in.
Right. Their whole fail fast, learn faster idea. But honestly, when you see these videos of Starship blowing up, it's hard not to think something went really wrong. Can you help me understand that approach a little bit better?
Oh, totally. I mean, those visuals are intense, but you have to think about it this way. Every time that Starship explodes, SpaceX gets a ton of data about what went wrong. Then they can look at it, make changes to the design, and try it again.
So it's kind of like a super extreme version of trial and error.
Yeah, basically. Now, of course, the big thing is that they have to do this without putting people at risk. And that's where the debate gets really, really heated.
And you can't ignore the safety concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got debris falling near where people live, messing with air travel, damaging the environment.
Yeah.
It feels like SpaceX is pushing it, maybe even too far. What are the strongest arguments against how they're doing things?
Well, the biggest one is definitely public safety. I mean, debris falling from the sky, that's a scary thought, and it's actually happened with Starship.
Right.
So there's this concern about not just stuff falling from the sky and hitting something, but also sonic booms and delays with airplanes and, people say SpaceX is putting speed over safety and not doing enough to make it less risky.
Yeah, and it's not just the area right around where they launch these things either, right? We've got reports of debris from Starship Flight 8 landing all the way in the Caribbean.
Hundreds of miles away.
Hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, and that just shows how these explosions could have really big consequences. And it makes you wonder if SpaceX is really thinking about how their actions are affecting the whole world.
And there's the environmental side, too. Launching and exploding rockets, that puts a lot of pollution in the air, and those pieces that fall down, that can be really bad for the ocean.
Absolutely. The environmental impact of space travel is becoming a bigger and bigger concern, and SpaceX's critics are saying that they're just not doing enough.
Okay, so we've got safety concerns, environmental concerns, and even maybe some ethical questions about how far is too far when it comes to progress. It's a lot to think about, but before we get too deep into those criticisms, what's the other side of the story? What are the best arguments in favor of SpaceX's way of doing things, even with the explosions and the risks?
Well, to start with, SpaceX supporters say that they're completely changing the space industry. They're not just building rockets. They're building a future where space travel is something we do all the time and anyone can afford it.
So they're saying the explosions are kind of a necessary evil to get to that future.
That's what they would say, yeah. They say that every time something fails, they learn something, and that's really important for making Starship better and more reliable.
It's a bold approach, I'll give them that.
It is, and it's super risky.
It's risky, yeah. Let's dig into those arguments a bit more in part 2 of this deep dive.
Yeah, let's do it. You have to admit their track record with Falcon 9 is impressive. They've landed and reused those boosters so many times. It's crazy.
Yeah, they've definitely changed things with reusable rockets. And You can't deny the excitement around Starship. It feels like everyone's watching to see if they can actually pull it off.
And the potential benefits are huge if this thing actually works. It could open up so many possibilities for space exploration, research, even commercial stuff.
Let's talk about those benefits a bit more. What's the big vision here? Why is Starship so important for achieving those goals?
Think about it this way. If you can make it way cheaper to get to space, all of a sudden you can do all kinds of things.
Right.
Space tourism could be realistic. We could build bigger and better space stations, send more missions to explore the solar system.
We're talking about a whole new way of thinking about space. It wouldn't just be governments and space agencies anymore.
Exactly. It would be private companies, even regular people could play a role.
And it's not just about what we can do out in space. It's also about how this could help us here on Earth.
Right.
Okay, give me some examples. How could Starship benefit humanity? I mean, we've all heard about colonizing Mars, but what else is on the table?
Mars is definitely the big one. SpaceX wants to use Starship to establish a permanent human base on another planet.
Right.
That alone would be a massive achievement, but it also has practical implications.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, it would force us to develop new technologies and solutions for living in extreme environments. Think about things like climate change mitigation or disaster relief.
So the challenges of Mars could actually help us solve problems here at home.
Exactly, but it goes even further. Imagine mining asteroids for resources or building these giant solar power stations in space to beam clean energy back to Earth.
It sounds like science fiction solutions to real problems.
I know, right? But with Starship, those things might actually become possible. And don't forget about the science part.
Yeah.
A reusable spacecraft like Starship would mean we could send more missions to study planets, moons, asteroids, all kinds of stuff in our solar system. We could learn so much about how life began, the potential for resources out there, the vastness of the universe.
It's like opening up a whole new frontier of knowledge and possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you painted a pretty compelling picture of the potential benefits, but I'm still thinking about those risks. How do the people who support SpaceX respond to those concerns?
Well, they know there are risks, but they say the potential rewards are worth it.
Okay.
They say that space exploration has always been dangerous, that you can't do amazing things without taking some chances.
That classic no risk, no reward argument.
Exactly, and they point to the history of human exploration, sailing across oceans, climbing mountains, flying into space.
Yeah.
All of those things were seen as risky or even reckless back then, but they ended up being huge advancements for humanity.
So they're saying SpaceX is following in the footsteps of those pioneers, pushing the boundaries, even if it means accepting some level of risk.
That's their perspective. They argue that the pursuit of knowledge, expanding our horizons, and maybe even solving some of humanity's biggest problems, those things justify the risks involved in developing Starship.
Okay, I see their point. It's a powerful argument, but it's still a gamble, isn't it?
It definitely is a gamble, and it's one that not everyone's okay with.
Yeah. There's a real debate to be had about how much risk is okay and whether SpaceX is being responsible with their approach. But before we get into that, let's talk about the rules and regulations, all the official stuff.
All right, bringing on the red tape. We've heard about the FAA getting involved after some of those explosions. What role do government agencies play in all this?
Well, it's not as simple as just launching rockets whenever they want. There are rules and regulations that SpaceX has to follow, just like any other company.
Yeah.
And the FAA is responsible for making sure those launches are safe for people on the ground and for air traffic.
So after a big explosion like we saw with Starship Flight 8, the FAA has the power to step in and say, hold on, let's figure out what went wrong before you launch again.
Exactly. They can ground the entire program if they think there are serious safety concerns or if SpaceX isn't following the rules.
So they're not just there to rubber stamp launches, they're actually playing an active role in shaping how this whole space race unfolds.
Right. They're trying to balance encouraging innovation with making sure everything's done safely and responsibly. It's not like the Wild West out there, even if it kind of feels like it sometimes, with all these private companies launching rockets.
Yeah, it's definitely not the Wild West anymore. There's this whole complicated system of rules, international agreements, ethical considerations, all that stuff.
And as space travel becomes more and more commercialized, those rules are going to have to change and adapt.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how it all evolves.
It makes you wonder what the future of space exploration will look like. Will it be like a free-for-all with everyone competing for resources and dominance?
Yeah.
Or can we figure out a way to work together and be more sustainable?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the answer is probably somewhere in between.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already seeing signs of both competition and collaboration. You've got companies like SpaceX pushing the boundaries, doing their own thing. But you also have things like the International Space Station, where countries are working together and sharing resources.
It feels like we're at this really important point where we have to decide what kind of future we want in space.
It really does. And the decisions we make now are going to have a huge impact on what happens for generations to come.
It's not just about the technology, it's about our vision, our values, our responsibility for this planet and beyond.
Right.
So after taking this deep dive into all the arguments for and against SpaceX's approach, the good stuff and the bad stuff, where does that leave us? What's your big picture take on all this?
It's complicated. There's no easy answer. It's not black and white.
Right.
On the one hand, we have this incredible urge to explore, to push the limits, to reach for the stars, and SpaceX really captures that spirit. They're moving us forward, challenging what we think is possible.
But they're also pushing the limits when it comes to risk, maybe even bending the rules a bit too much just to make progress.
Yeah, that's the big debate. Are we willing to accept the risks, the explosions, the environmental impact, the possibility of things going wrong in exchange for a future where humanity has gone beyond Earth?
And in the end, it's not just up to SpaceX or Elon Musk to answer that question. It's a question for all of us. What kind of future do we want? And what are we willing to sacrifice to get there?
That's a great point. It's something we all need to think about.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on. I think the future of space exploration is still being written. It's being shaped by the choices we make, the conversations we have, the questions we ask.
Could have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep looking up at the stars and wondering what's out there. And remember, the future of space is in our hands. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of SpaceX's Starship.